My name is Clara, and I want to tell you a story about the home I built. Not the one of glass and stone nestled in the hills of Austin, but the intricate architecture of a marriage, a life so meticulously designed that it appeared flawless to the naked eye. For 12 years, I was its chief architect, its interior designer, its curator. My husband, Leo, was its brilliant, celebrated occupant. Our life was a museum exhibit titled The Perfect Couple, and we played our parts with unwavering dedication. This story is about the day I discovered the museum was built over a sinkhole, and how I chose to dynamite the foundations rather than watch it slowly crumble. It is the story of how I learned that the most devastating truths are not shouted from the rooftops, but whispered by a small gray smart speaker in the quiet of an empty bedroom. To understand the demolition, you must first appreciate the structure. Our world was one of curated perfection. We lived in Westlake Hills, a place where the concept of an unmanicured lawn was a foreign one, and the quiet hum of electric vehicles was the dominant soundtrack. Our house, a sprawling modern colonial with vast panes of glass overlooking the Texas hill country, had been my magnum opus. I had spent a year with the architects, obsessing over every line, every material, from the vein patterns in the Carrara marble countertops to the specific species of bamboo that lined the driveway. Leo, a titan at a prestigious investment firm, Harrison and Finch, provided the capital. I provided the soul. He was the brilliant, charismatic engine of our wealth. I was the silent, meticulous engineer who made the machine of our life run so beautifully it appeared effortless. Our brand was perfection. Our product was envy. I think back to an evening that now feels like a scene from a different life, a different movie. It was early October, and the Texas heat had finally broken. We were hosting our biannual fundraiser for the Austin Children's Hospital, an event I had built from a small backyard gathering into one of the city's premier charity events. 300 of Austin's most influential people mingled on our vast, multi-tiered stone patio. The scent of night-blooming jasmine from the gardens, I tended myself mixed with the expensive perfumes of the guests. A jazz trio played softly near the infinity pool, their notes drifting over the murmur of conversations about stock options and summer homes in the Hamptons. My work had started days earlier. I'd overseen the installation of a massive clear-span tent in case of rain, the erection of a temporary stage for the band, and the placement of dozens of towering floral arrangements I'd designed myself. On the day of the event, I was a blur of motion, a conductor ensuring every section of the orchestra was in tune. I checked the temperature of the white wine with the head caterer. I adjusted the lighting with the tech crew. I smoothed over a minor crisis when the valet service reported they were running out of space. Every problem was anticipated, every contingency planned for. Leo, of course, arrived just as the party was hitting its stride, perfectly timed to make a grand entrance. He swept in looking like a king, dressed in a custom Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than my first car. He radiated an easy, confident power that drew people to him like moths to a flame. I watched him from a distance as he was immediately swarmed by admirers, by business associates, by the city's power players. He navigated the crowd with practiced ease, a hand on someone's back here, a shared laugh there, a low, confidential word in someone else's ear. He was a master of his universe. Cynthia Davies, whose husband had just sold his software company for a figure with 9 zeros, glided over to me, her diamond necklace sparkling aggressively. "Clara, darling," she cooed, air-kissing the space beside my cheek. "You've done it again. It's absolutely flawless. I was just talking to the mayor's wife, and she said your parties are the only ones she actually looks forward to. And Leo, my God, he's holding court like a Roman emperor. You two are just... You're a dynasty." I gave her my serene, well-rehearsed smile, the one that conveyed both humility and utter competence. "He's the star, Cynthia. I just make sure the stage is properly lit. Darling, you build the whole damn theater, she countered with a throaty laugh. He's a lucky, lucky man. Don't ever let him forget it. The comment, so casually delivered, would later return to me with the force of a physical blow. Later that night, as the event was winding down, Leo found me on the quietest corner of the patio. He came up behind me, his arms sliding around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder as we looked out at the glittering tapestry of the city below. The air was cool and clean. That was a triumph, Clara, he murmured, his voice a low hum of pure satisfaction. I just spent 20 minutes talking to Harrison. He was practically beaming. He said the event raised our firm's profile immeasurably. He said I have a wife who is a priceless asset. He turned me around to face him. His eyes were shining with a mixture of pride and adrenaline. You are a priceless asset. You know that? The most beautiful, most brilliant woman in this entire city. What would I do without you? He kissed me, a deep, possessive kiss that tasted of expensive scotch and victory. For the benefit of the few remaining guests, I melted into it. But even then, a tiny, cold part of my mind registered that his compliment was about my utility to him, my value as an asset to his career. I dismissed the thought as uncharitable. I was tired. I was being cynical. This was what a successful partnership looked like. The first tremors of the earthquake that would shatter my life were so subtle, I almost didn't feel them. It started with the phone. It had always been a third limb for Leo, but its function shifted. It became a private world, a locked garden to which I was not invited. He began angling the screen away from me when he typed, a small, subconscious gesture of concealment. Texts would arrive at 11 p.m., and a slow, private smile would spread across his face as he read them. It was a smile I didn't recognize, a smile of sly, secret pleasure. Who are you texting so late? I asked once, trying to sound more curious than accusatory, as I curled up with a book in our vast bed. Just Mark from compliance, he'd replied, without looking up from the glowing screen. He's in a different time zone in his head. The guy's a machine, never sleeps. The lie was smooth, plausible, and delivered with the casual disregard of a man who assumes he will be believed. Then came the new password on his personal laptop. For 12 years, we had shared a password for everything, a silly, sentimental relic from our dating days. One afternoon, I went to use his laptop to look up a flight for a potential vacation and was met with a stark, impersonal box. Access denied. The words felt like a digital slap. Oh, right, I forgot to tell you, he'd said that evening when I asked, his tone airy as he unbuttoned his shirt cuffs. IT had a massive security scare last week, some phishing scam out of Eastern Europe. They're making everyone in senior management use two-factor authentication and change all their personal device passwords. It's a whole new protocol, a huge pain in the neck. I'll log you in if you need it. He never offered me the new password. It wasn't a security upgrade. It was a wall. The late nights at the office became a recurring feature of our marriage. What was once a rarity became a weekly, then bi-weekly, event. He would come home long after I was in bed, slipping between the cool sheets with an apologetic whisper. He smelled of whiskey and smoke, and underneath it all, a faint, sweet, cloying perfume that wasn't mine. It was a cheap, synthetic vanilla, the kind of scent that clings. I would lie there, rigid in the darkness, my heart a cold stone in my chest, feigning sleep. The vast, empty space in our California king bed felt like a chasm between us. In the morning, I would play my part. Rough night, honey? The worst, he'd sigh, rubbing his temples. We're trying to close the Nakamoto deal. These guys are just brutal. We were out with them until 2 a.m. at the Roosevelt Room, pouring scotch down their throats. You know the game, Clara. It's what it takes. I always pretended to believe him. because the alternative was a truth so monstrous I couldn't bear to look it in the eye. The alternative was that my entire life, my perfect, curated, celebrated life, was a lie. And I, its chief architect, was living in a condemned building. I chose denial. It was a full-time job, and the emotional labor was crushing me. The day the truth finally forced its way into the open was a Tuesday. A painfully bright, aggressively ordinary Tuesday in mid-November. Leo was supposedly in Dallas for a 2-day conference on global investment strategies. He'd packed his leather overnight bag that morning with a distracted air, kissed me on the cheek with lips that felt cool and distant, and rushed out, his phone already pressed to his ear. I spent the day working, finding solace in the controllable chaos of my job. I was juggling the logistics for a tech billionaire's daughter's wedding, a monstrous event that now involved sourcing a specific rare orchid from a grower in Hawaii. My mind was a fortress of timelines, contracts, and seating charts, a welcome refuge from the creeping dread that had become my constant companion. Late in the afternoon, my head throbbing with a tension headache, I decided to take a break. I went upstairs to our bedroom, my personal sanctuary of serene grays and creams. The room was flooded with the warm, buttery light of the late afternoon sun. It was quiet. Too quiet. I began to tidy up, a mindless, soothing ritual that usually calmed my nerves. I straightened the stack of unread financial thrillers on his nightstand. I plumped the dozen pillows on our perfectly made bed. And as I smoothed the crisp white duvet on his side, my hand brushed against something small and hard, tucked under the lip of the nightstand, almost invisible against the deep pile of the wool rug. Curious, I knelt down, my knees cracking in the silence. My fingers closed around a small, simple silver hoop earring. It was not mine. I stood up, the earring feeling cold and foreign in the palm of my hand. It was cheap, flimsy, the kind of thing one might buy from a street vendor. I could have bent it in half with my fingers. I walked into our enormous, custom-built walk-in closet, a room the size of a small apartment. I opened my jewelry armoire, a velvet-lined fortress of my own. I scanned the neat rows of gold necklaces, the diamond studs, the pearl bracelets. Not a single piece of silver. My skin was too sensitive for anything but gold or platinum. My mind, the efficient problem-solving machine, went into overdrive, desperately trying to construct an innocent explanation. Maria? Our housekeeper? I pictured her immediately, a devout, grandmotherly woman who wore only the small gold cross her husband had given her 40 years ago. It wasn't Maria's. My best friend, Sarah? We'd had lunch the week before, but Sarah was even more allergic to cheap metal than I was. She joked that her skin could detect a single molecule of nickel from a block away. I ran through a mental Rolodex of every woman who had been in our house in the last year. None of them fit. The earring felt like evidence, a clue left behind at a crime scene. And with that thought, my perception of the room shifted. I was no longer in my sanctuary. I was in a compromised space. I looked around with new, hyper-aware eyes. I saw the faint, almost invisible smudge of bright pink lipstick on the rim of a water glass on his nightstand, a garish shade I would never wear. I saw the way the pillow next to his was indented, not just his own, as if two heads had lain there, side by side. I sniffed the air, and underneath the subtle fragrance of my diptyque room spray, I could detect it, that same sweet, cloying vanilla. My gaze landed on the Aura smart speaker, sitting silent and impassive on his nightstand. Leo's toy, the device that streamlined our lives. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I walked to my dresser and picked up my phone. My hands were shaking so violently that it took me 3 attempts to unlock it with my fingerprint. I found the familiar blue icon of the Aura app and tapped it, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The app opened. I navigated through the menus, my breath catching in my throat. Settings, history, activity log. The screen refreshed, and a list of timestamps and commands appeared. The top of the log was a record of my own mundane day. But I wasn't interested in the present. I was interested in the past. I took a deep, shuddering breath and began to scroll back. Back to Monday, the day he was supposedly on his way to the airport for his 8 p.m. flight to Dallas. The log told a very different story. 7:15 p.m. Aura, play the Vibes playlist on Spotify. His private playlist, the one he listened to on his noise-canceling headphones when he wanted to get in the zone. Moody, sensual R&B, music he never ever played when I was home. 9:30 p.m. Aura, order a large pepperoni and jalapeno pizza from Via 313 and a side of cheesy bread. Leo's voice. He despised spicy food. He claimed it gave him acid reflux. This was my favorite late-night indulgence. The casual, intimate cruelty of it, ordering my favorite junk food with another woman in my home, in my bed, was a special kind of violation. It was a mockery. 10:17 p.m. Aura, play The Weekend. The voice was a woman's, breathy, confident, and utterly unfamiliar. A voice that sounded young and unbothered. The room began to feel like it was tilting. I sat heavily on the edge of our bed, the bed we had picked out together at a high-end design store, now feeling like a cold slab in a morgue. I couldn't stop scrolling. It was a morbid compulsion. I had to know the full extent of the desecration. 10:45 p.m. Aura, dim the bedroom lights to 20%. Leo's voice, lower now, more intimate. 10:46 p.m. Aura, stop the music. The woman's voice, immediately followed by a light, tinkling giggle. It was a sound of pure, intimate pleasure, a sound that echoed in the silent room and seemed to shatter the very air around me. 11:12 p.m. Aura, turn the temperature down to 68 degrees. Her voice again. An intruder making herself comfortable. An invader adjusting the climate of my home, my sanctuary, to her own preference. A wave of hot, acidic nausea washed over me. This was not a moment of weakness, a one-time mistake. This was comfortable. This was practiced. She had been here before. How many times had I come home to a house that felt slightly off? A thermostat changed, a strange scent in the air, and dismissed it as my own paranoia. I forced my eyes down the list. There was a gap in the command log. 2 hours and 14 minutes of digital silence. But my imagination, vivid and cruel, filled that silence with sound and motion, with high-definition images of them, here, in this room, in my bed, on my expensive fret sheets, her head on my pillow, laughing. And then, the final entries, the ones that would be seared into my memory, the digital brand on my soul. The device, always listening, had picked up background conversation. 1:30 a.m. Aura, what's my name? The woman's voice, coy and victorious, a test of her power over him. There was a pause. Then Leo's voice, not a command, but a low, sated murmur, thick with a post-coital languor I knew all too well. Your name is Tiffany, he'd said, his voice a lazy caress. And you are going to be the absolute end of me. He'd followed it with his deep, rumbling laugh. A laugh I had once believed was a sound created solely for my benefit. Tiffany. The name hung in the air, ugly and common. He had gambled our entire world, a life of immense beauty and curated privilege, for a Tiffany. The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the rug. The screen, with its damning log of my life's destruction, stared up at the ceiling. I didn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears. It was a seismic shock that had fractured the very bedrock of my reality. Every shared memory was now a lie. Every loving word was now a potential cruelty. Our life wasn't a masterpiece. It was a forgery. And I had been its proud, oblivious, and ultimately pathetic curator. I sat there, motionless, for I don't know how long. An hour? 2? The afternoon sun bled into a dusky purple twilight outside the window. The world kept turning, but mine had ground to a halt. The first wave of grief hit me then, a physical blow that knocked the air from my lungs. It was a pain so vast, so all-consuming, it felt like I was drowning in an ocean of it. This wasn't just about sex. He had shared our sanctuary. He had let a stranger into the heart of our life, and in doing so, he had poisoned every memory, every shared moment. The foundation of our 12 years together was sand, and the tide had just come in with brutal, devastating force. When my phone rang an hour later, the cheerful, custom ringtone I'd set for him a screaming mockery, I stared at his smiling face on the screen. Leo, beaming, on a beach in Hawaii, his arm around me. It took every ounce of my willpower to answer. "Hey, honey, just checking in from the hotel," his cheerful, lying voice chirped. I took a breath. My own voice, when it came, was a marvel of chilling control. "Hey, you, just getting ready to make some dinner. I hope you're having a productive time." "It's a grind, baby. You know how it is. Stuck in a windowless conference room all day. Can't wait to be home with you." The lie was so smooth, so practiced. I pictured him, lying in our bed, the sheets probably still rumpled from his tryst, the scent of his mistress still lingering in the air as he fed me another line from the script of our sham marriage. "I can't wait either, my love," I said, the endearment tasting like ash in my mouth. "Sleep well." I hung up. I stood up from the bed. I walked into our cavernous, custom-built walk-in closet. On his side, rows of immaculate suits and starched shirts. On my side, a rainbow of designer dresses, the costumes of our life. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes dark and wide. The heartbroken woman who had sat on that bed just an hour ago was gone. In her place was someone else, someone colder, calmer, and infinitely more dangerous. He thought I was the set dressing, the pretty, organized wife who made his life comfortable. He had mistaken my love for blindness, my dedication for weakness. He had no idea that the same meticulous, obsessive attention to detail I used to plan a multi-million-dollar wedding could be repurposed. He was an investment banker. He understood risk and reward, assets and liabilities. He had just made himself a liability, and I was about to liquidate everything. My next event would be my masterpiece. It would be a party to end all parties, and he was the guest of honor. For the next week, I was an actress giving the performance of a lifetime. I was a ghost in my own home, a silent observer in a play where I was supposed to be the leading lady. When Leo returned from his conference, I greeted him at the door with a warm, lingering kiss that felt like pressing my lips to cold marble. I inhaled deeply as I hugged him, and there it was again, faint but unmistakable under his expensive cologne, the sweet, cheap scent of Tiffany. I didn't flinch. I just filed it away. Another piece of data for my growing dossier. "God, I missed you," he said, dropping his travel bag and pulling me into an embrace that felt both hollow and suffocating. "The house wasn't the same without you," I replied, my voice a perfect imitation of wifely sincerity. That night, I cooked his favorite meal, pan-seared scallops with a saffron risotto. We sat at our long, formal dining table, the one we rarely used, under the blinding glare of a crystal chandelier. We drank a bottle of expensive Chateauneuf du Pape. He talked animatedly about the deal he was working on, the idiots in the compliance department, the genius move he'd made in the market that day. I listened, nodded, and asked intelligent questions. I refilled his wine glass. I laughed at his jokes. I played the part of the adoring, supportive wife flawlessly. Inside, I was a cold, calculating machine, taking notes, mapping his world, identifying its pressure points, its vulnerabilities. His arrogance was his greatest weakness. He truly believed he was invincible, that his world was secure. And that arrogance would be the key I would use to unlock and then demolish his entire kingdom. My first strategic move was to seek professional counsel, but not in the way one might expect. I didn't want a divorce lawyer who would counsel mediation and amicable splits. I needed a shark, A discreet referral from a former client whose husband was a notorious philanderer led me to Annalise Davenport. Her office was in a sleek, anonymous glass tower downtown, a space that felt more like a modern art gallery than a law firm. All white marble, black leather, and brutalist art. There were no family photos, no comforting ferns. It was a place for strategy, not sympathy. Annalise was a woman in her late 50s with a severe black bob that looked like it could cut glass, eyes that missed nothing, and a reputation as the most feared divorce attorney in the state of Texas. Men like Leo were her specialty. She didn't just divorce them, she dismantled them. I sat across from her at a vast black desk that felt like a slab of polished obsidian, and I did not cry. I did not rage. I laid out my situation with the calm precision of a general briefing her commander. I told her I suspected my husband of infidelity and, more importantly, of moving marital assets into undisclosed accounts. I did not mention the earring or the aura speaker. This was not about emotion. This was a business transaction. I am not here to file for divorce at this time, I stated clearly, my voice steady. Not yet. I am here for a strategic consultation. I need to understand every loophole, every legal weapon at my disposal. I want to know how a man like my husband protects his money, and I want to know how a woman like me can take it. Annalise listened without interruption, her fingers steepled under her chin, her sharp eyes boring into me. When I finished, a slow, thin smile touched her lips. "Mrs. Sullivan," she said, her voice low and resonant. "Most women who walk in here are drowning in a sea of tears and righteous indignation. You appear to be calmly drafting a battle plan. I find that invigorating." For the next 2 hours, she gave me a brutal, brilliant education in financial warfare. She drew diagrams on a whiteboard, explaining the intricacies of offshore shell corporations, blind trusts, and the critical legal concept of commingling of assets. She taught me the difference between marital and separate property in the state of Texas, about the power of forensic accounting, and about the absolute necessity of creating a clean, undeniable paper trail. I left her office not with a sense of comfort, but with a cold, clear, and terrifying sense of purpose. Annalise had given me the schematics. Now I just had to build the bomb. My home office, once a place of creative, joyful work, became my command center. My nights were no longer for sleep. They were for study. I became an expert in things I never thought I would need to know. I subscribed to a high-level VPN service and started using the Tor browser, descending into the murky depths of the internet where financial anonymity was a traded commodity. I read white papers on international banking law from the London School of Economics. I watched hours of tutorials on cryptocurrency tumbling, a method for laundering digital assets that made them virtually untraceable. I ordered used textbooks on forensic accounting and corporate law. I was no longer planning weddings. I was planning a coup. The plan had 3 distinct, overlapping phases, each designed to attack a pillar of Leo's carefully constructed identity. Phase 1, financial ruin. Phase 2, professional assassination. Phase 3, public humiliation. Phase 1 began with the creation of a ghost. I became Clara Preston again, my maiden name, a name that felt both strange and liberating on my tongue. I acquired a new laptop, a burner, paid for in cash from a nondescript big box store. I got a series of prepaid burner phones, each purchased from a different pharmacy across the city. I opened a new bank account in a different state under the Preston name, using a mail forwarding service in Delaware as my address. This was my domestic base of operations. From there, I undertook the most nerve-wracking task of all, opening a discreet, numbered offshore account. It involved encrypted video calls with a clipped, efficient banker in the Cayman Islands who asked pointed questions about the source of my funds. I channeled my most demanding, high-maintenance bridezilla client, speaking with an authority and impatience that left little room for suspicion. I was Clara Preston, a savvy, independent investor seeking to diversify her portfolio. By the time it was done, my ghost had a safe house. Then, I began to bleed him. I didn't make large, sudden withdrawals. That would trigger alarms at the bank and, potentially, in his own mind. I was more subtle. I was a planner. I wrote a small, simple computer script that initiated a series of small, random daily transfers from our numerous joint brokerage and savings accounts. $417.32 one day, $854.11 the next. These were amounts designed to look like routine transactions, like stock dividends or automated bill payments, easily lost in the digital static of a multi-million-dollar portfolio. Every day, the funds trickled into the Clara Preston account. And from there, once a week, I would wire a six-figure sum to my fortress in the Caymans. I was building my war chest with his money, a dowry for my new life. While securing my own future, I began the far more creative work of fabricating the narrative of his downfall. His arrogance was my greatest ally. He never changed the password to our home network after that first time, and he often left his work laptop open and unattended on his home office desk. I became a digital phantom. I used his own computer to create a series of brilliantly forged documents. I taught myself to use professional-grade editing software to alter bank statements, creating a false paper trail that showed him making large, suspicious transfers from his corporate accounts to a shell corporation I invented, Labyrinth Holdings, registered in Belize. I composed emails from him to a fictitious wealth manager in Singapore, discussing strategies to shield assets in anticipation of a contentious divorce. I made sure these digital forgeries were buried deep within his system, in hidden, encrypted files, waiting like landmines. My masterpiece of forgery was the fake correspondence with a top divorce lawyer. I created an entire email chain, crafting his voice perfectly, a little arrogant, a little paranoid, complaining about his spendthrift wife and his desire to start fresh. I seeded these emails with details about our life that only he could know, a reference to our Napa trip, a complaint about my mother, making them utterly, damningly convincing. This wasn't just about taking the money, it was about rewriting his story. I was framing him not as a simple cheater, but as a cunning, criminal mastermind. With the financial trap set, I moved to phase 2, his career. His identity was inextricably linked with his title at Harrison and Finch. It was the source of his power, his pride, his very sense of self. I would tarnish it beyond repair. The anonymous whistleblower hotline was my chosen weapon. I spent an entire week composing the email. It was a work of fiction so compelling it deserved an award. I wrote as David Chen, a terrified but morally upright junior analyst who had accidentally discovered that his celebrated boss, Mr. Leo Sullivan, was engaged in what appeared to be a massive scheme to defraud the firm and its clients. The email was a symphony of feigned reluctance and damning detail. I referenced specific and entirely fabricated transaction codes. I hinted at a secret life funded by stolen money, at lavish gifts for a mysterious mistress. I attached 2 of my most convincing forgeries as proof. I drove to a gritty, run-down public library on the other side of the city, a place Leo wouldn't be caught dead in. I wore a hat and sunglasses. I felt like a character in a spy movie, my heart hammering against my ribs. I sat at a sticky computer terminal, logged into a new anonymous email account I had created for David, and sent my poison pen letter to the confidential, third-party ethics hotline of Harrison and Finch. Clicking send was a point of no return. The arrow was loosed from the bow. Phase 3 required the most patience, the most skill as an actress. It was the public execution, and it would be disguised as the party of the year, his 40th birthday. It was 3 months away, giving my other plans time to marinate and take effect. I had to live with him, sleep next to him, and perform the role of a loving wife with utter conviction. It was the most draining, soul-destroying period of my life. There were nights I would lie awake, listening to his steady breathing, and feel the weight of my deception pressing down on me. I had to fight the urge to confess, or to simply pack a bag and disappear. But then I would hear that silvery giggle from the aura speaker in my memory, and my resolve would harden like steel. I suggested the party to him one evening as he was complaining about a new compliance protocol at work, a protocol I knew was a direct result of my email. I came up behind him and massaged his tense shoulders. "Honey," I murmured, "you are under so much stress. You need something to look forward to, something wonderful. Let me throw you a party for your 40th, a real blowout, a surprise. You deserve a night where everyone can see what a brilliant, incredible man you are." His ego, already bruised by the secret corporate investigation he couldn't understand, was a thirsty sponge. He soaked it up. The prospect of a grand celebration, a testament to his success and popularity, was a siren song he couldn't resist. He turned, his tired eyes lighting up. "Really, Clara? You'd do all that? A surprise party? Right now?" "Especially now," I said, sealing his fate with a kiss. "You deserve a night where you are celebrated like the king you are." The party planning became my obsession. It was the perfect cover for my secret activities. The constant phone calls, the private meetings with vendors, the late nights on my computer. It was all part of the act. I booked the top-floor ballroom at the Four Seasons. I hired a celebrity chef to design the menu. I sent out 300 invitations on thick, creamy cardstock with elegant black script announcing a celebration of Leo Sullivan's legacy. The irony was my own private, bitter joke. The guest list was a strategic document. I invited everyone who mattered in his world. And, in a stroke of vicious genius, I found a way to invite Tiffany. Through some digital sleuthing on social media, I discovered she was a brand ambassador for a high-end boutique tequila company that often sponsored corporate events. I contacted the company's marketing department and hired them to host a complimentary tequila tasting bar at the party. I spoke with a cheerful marketing manager, and, with a voice dripping with false sweetness, I specifically requested their top Austin-based brand ambassador, Tiffany Miller. I told them I'd heard she was simply the best. I wanted her in the room. I wanted her to have a front-row seat for the detonation. The centerpiece of the party, the blade of my guillotine, was the tribute video. I spent weeks compiling it, a saccharine journey through his life. I called his mother, who wept with joy, and emailed me dozens of embarrassing baby photos. I had lunch with his best man from our wedding, who shared funny, heartfelt stories from their college days. I edited it all together, creating a moving, sentimental journey through his life. It was designed to lull the entire room, and Leo himself, into a state of warm, fuzzy affection. But the final 2 minutes were mine alone. In the dead of night, in the locked sanctuary of my office, I worked on the real ending. I used professional audio software to isolate and clean the recordings from the Aura speaker. I compiled the faked documents, the real bank statements showing transfers to Tiffany, the lurid text messages I'd recovered from his cloud backups. I edited it all into a brutal, fast-paced montage of his sins. It was a digital assassination set to a cold, minimalist electronic track. 2 weeks before the party, my HR source called me, her voice a low whisper. "It's happening, Clara. The board held a secret meeting. He's out. They're letting him go on Monday, the day after his party. They're trying to keep it quiet to avoid a panic, but they're bringing in the SEC. He's toast." The timing was almost poetic. He would be celebrating the pinnacle of his life on Saturday, and on Monday, he would be professionally executed. He just didn't know it yet. The night of the party was electric. The ballroom at the Four Seasons was a glittering fantasy of white orchids and crystal. I wore a gown of blood-red silk. Leo, utterly oblivious, was radiant. He was at the peak of his powers, surrounded by his adoring subjects. He had no idea he was a dead man walking. He greeted guests, a broad, confident smile on his face. I stood by his side, the perfect political wife, my own smile a carefully constructed mask. I saw Tiffany at her tequila bar, looking young and a little overwhelmed by the opulence of the event. Our eyes met for a moment across the crowded room. I gave her a small, warm smile. She smiled back, a little nervously. She had no idea who I was. The moment came after the main course plates were cleared. I walked to the stage, the spotlight finding me in my red dress. A hush fell. I looked out at the sea of faces, his mother smiling proudly, Mr. Harrison looking stern and important, his friends raising their glasses. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady and clear. "Leo, my love, for 12 years, you have been my world. Tonight, I wanted to give you, and everyone here, a small glimpse into the journey of the incredible man we are all here to celebrate. This is for you." I nodded to the AV technician. The lights dimmed. The giant screens came to life. The first 10 minutes were flawless. The room filled with laughter, tears, and applause. The video was a perfect tribute, ending on a beautiful photo of us at our wedding. The words, "Happy 40th birthday, my love, my everything," appearing on screen as a sweeping orchestral score swelled. The screen faded to black. The music faded out. The room was suspended in a perfect moment of shared sentiment, ready to erupt in applause. Leo, standing beside the stage, looked at me, his eyes shining with tears of gratitude. Then, into the perfect silence, from the state-of-the-art sound system, came the sound of a young woman's giggle. It was so unexpected, so jarring, that the room held its breath. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Leo's adoring smile faltered, replaced by a look of utter confusion. He looked at me, his brow furrowed. Then his own voice, low, intimate, and electronically pristine, filled the ballroom. "Aura, dim the bedroom lights to 20%. The black screen was replaced by a stark, white-on-black screenshot of the Aura command log, the timestamp clearly visible. "Clara?" Leo whispered, his voice cracking. "What the hell is this? Turn it off!" I just stood there, watching him, my expression a serene mask. The audio was relentless. "Aura, what's my name?" The woman's playful voice echoed through the silent room. And then the death blow. His voice, clear as a bell for all his family, friends, and colleagues to hear. "Your name is Tiffany, and you are trouble." As his words hung in the air, the screen erupted in a rapid-fire assault of his sins. Bank statements, highlighted to show the flow of thousands of dollars to an account in the name of Tiffany Miller, her smiling headshot now displayed next to the transactions. Screenshots of their text messages, magnified to a monstrous size. The flowchart of his corporate malfeasance, the fake emails to the divorce lawyer. It was a 2-minute character assassination, delivered with the slick production values of a corporate presentation. The silence in the room was now a living entity. It was thick, heavy, and suffocating. I could see Tiffany, her face pale with horror, trying to sink into the floor behind her tequila bar. I could see Mr. Harrison, his face a thundercloud, his jaw set like concrete. I could see Leo's mother, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide with uncomprehending pain. The video ended. The screens went black. The house lights came up slowly, cruelly, bathing the entire horrific tableau in a bright, unforgiving light. Leo stood there, shaking, exposed in the center of the room, in the center of the life he had just lost. He stared at me, his eyes pleading, then hardening with fury. "You," he breathed, his voice a strangled rasp. "You did this!" I picked up the microphone one last time. My voice was calm, almost conversational. "That," I said, my gaze sweeping the room before landing on him, "was my gift. And for all of you," I addressed the stunned guests, "please, don't leave without your party favors. There is a gift bag on every chair. It contains a small token for you to remember this legacy." A collective, nervous rustle ensued as people hesitantly reached for the elegant black gift bags. I knew what they would find. Not a commemorative champagne flute, but a sleek black USB drive, branded with the party's logo, Leo Sullivan, a celebration of a legacy. And on that drive, a password-protected folder containing a PDF of every piece of evidence they had just seen, along with a copy of the meticulously detailed, anonymous whistleblower report I had sent to the Harrison and Finch Ethics Board. I had delivered my evidence to a room full of powerful witnesses. My work was done. "Happy birthday, my love," I said, the words dripping with ice. I placed the microphone gently back in its stand. Then I turned and walked off the stage. The crowd parted for me as if I were Moses and they were the Red Sea. No one spoke. No one moved. I walked with my head held high, through the entire length of the ballroom, through the gilded lobby of the Four Seasons, and out into the humid embrace of the Austin night. The town car was waiting, just as I had planned. As it pulled away from the curb, I allowed myself one final look back at the Grand Hotel. A beautiful facade, hiding a scene of utter devastation. It was perfect. I moved to a sleepy, fog-shrouded town on the Oregon coast where no one knew my name. I bought a small cottage on a cliff overlooking the endless gray expanse of the Pacific Ocean and a little flower shop in the town's center, which I have since turned into a thriving business. I am Clara Preston again. I spend my days now with dirt under my fingernails, coaxing life from the earth. The scents of my life are no longer Chanel and expensive whiskey, but damp soil, salty air, and the sweet perfume of hyacinths and freesia. The revenge did not fix what was broken inside me. It did not heal the wound. But it was a form of justice. It was the act of taking back the narrative, of refusing to be the silent, collateral damage in the story of his betrayal. It was a controlled burn. It destroyed the diseased forest of my old life, but it cleared the way for new growth. So I leave you with this question. When your world is burned down by an arsonist you once loved, what path do you choose? Do you sit in the ashes and weep? Or do you pick up a torch of your own and burn their world down right back, using the blaze to light your own way out of the darkness? There is no easy or right answer, but I know which path I took. And while my hands will always smell faintly of smoke, I can finally breathe the clean, salt air of my new life. And for the first time in a very long time, I am at peace.